And that's when I started questioning victimhood. But it made me go, what does it mean to be a victim? How much of this am I choosing, and how much of it is someone else like inflicting on me, and can I blame them? And I didn't have the answers then, because it's a very complex question, and it like lots of layers to all of it. But that question itself opened up a lot for me.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Energy Healing Conversations. We are on the series of spiritual awakening stories, and today's episode is about losing yourself to find yourself. Today, I have Taryn Nightingale, who's in Cape Town while I'm in London, and we are going to have a beautiful conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. Taryn, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience today, please?
I'm Taryn Nightingale. I have been with the school since just about 2021, early 2022. And I started as a student in energy healing. I am now a tutor at the School of Energy Healing as well as psychic development. And I also run my own private practice where I do psychic readings, healing, as well as spiritual coaching, which I love very, very much. Yeah.
Taryn, thank you so much, and thank you for talking about what you do at the school. But today's not about the school, today's about your journey, and it's about your spiritual awakening. I think there have been a few awakenings, but I'd like to go back to the first one, and I'd like to talk about you as a child and you kind of growing up in your early teens. And we spoke about this earlier about the people pleasing, being the good girl. And I really want you to talk into that because I think there's something deep about that in your story.
So I love what you said about losing yourself to find yourself. So I remember when I was a little girl, I had a pretty good handle of who I was. I mean, I used to be very aware of spirits around me. It was very natural for me to see spirits. It was very natural for me to hear spirits. And I know that even when I was little, I would play with my dreams. You know, I would lucid dream, I would astral travel, I would play with my consciousness. And what I do is I'd like play with my consciousness and put it into the duvet and blankets. And I thought it was very normal. I thought everybody was doing that. It was very normal for me. And so, because it was so easy and natural for me, I started talking to the adults around me about that and other people around me. But it was particularly the adults who I spoke to, and there was a lot of fear that came up around that. And being a little girl, when you have adults mirror back to you this kind of fear around something that seems very natural to you, you start going, and I started going actually like, oh, there must be something wrong with me. Why do I do this but other people don't? And when I'm sharing about this, instead of it being encouraged or supported, I'm being looked at like I'm weird, like there is in fact something wrong with me. So I actually started fearing my gifts myself, and started kind of like alienating myself from it. I can see that now, but as a little girl, I didn't know what I was doing. But that's essentially what I started doing. I stopped talking about it that much. There was one person at school that I spoke about it to. And then as this was happening, I was grade two, so that I was about 7 years old, and I started doing well at school. And that was also pretty natural for me. So I didn't try particularly hard, but I noticed that when I got good marks at school, my parents applauded that. The adults around me were all like, yay, this is good. And I got a lot of approval and affirmation and validation actually on that. And so in my little girl's mind, I went, okay, this natural part of you, we have to suppress the spiritual gifts. And this part of you where you do really well at school, okay, so this is how you're loved. This is how you belong. This is where you belong. I think something that would have just been natural anyway started really taking over my identity, and I crafted my identity around that. So doing well, making sure I did well, making sure I did everything right, making sure I followed the responses of the adults around me, until that in itself became like natural. That felt normal because now it's at a behavior. It was a behavior that had become like really consistent for me, and it became my coping and survival mechanism. When I reached 12, which was the grade six period, I got invited for an interview to be the head girl at the school. And this was, I would say, probably one of the defining moments in my life, because they'd asked me in that interview. And just for context, I was in a primary school that was previously an Afrikaans school that only accepted white children at the school, because it was a school that was previously Model C school. So just accepted white kids, and they'd opened it to everybody in 1994. And my brother and I, we were one of the first colored people, so mixed race people at the school, right? And so now, me being in grade seven, or moving to grade seven, which would be the highest grade in the school, they invited me for this interview. And I remember the principal asked me, "Why do you want to be head girl at the school?" And we were one English class with four Afrikaans classes and minimal people of color and like minority English. So I said to the principal, "Well, I'd like to be an example for the English children as well as the children of color, that you can actually do well at school and you can be seen and you can be a leader despite what happened, you know." And this I was saying at 12. And I said to the principal at the time, "As you know, sir, I am colored." And the principal and the deputy principal were sitting there, and they kind of both just went, and I felt as this 12-year-old girl, like this heaviness just enter the entire room. And the principal said, "Could have fooled me." And yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And I could feel shame. I didn't know at the time what I was feeling, but I felt shame because I felt as though what I just had said, which was a very truthful answer for me and a very honest answer, and was really why I wanted to be head girl, was now, oh, ooh, you're colored, you know? Ooh, we didn't know that. And I could feel that I'd said the wrong thing, and the room felt like it went black. And I went home that day feeling like I had disappointed myself. I felt like I did something wrong. I spoke to my parents about it, and essentially, I wasn't head girl of the school. I wasn't deputy head girl either. And my parents fought it and actually had a bit of a back and forth with the school at the time. There were things that came out that were, I think, painful for my parents as well, dealing with the school. But what came out for me from that experience was I can't be who I really am. Now I can't be spiritual. I can't play with my consciousness, can't do that. And now I can't be the culture that I am and the race that I am. And that, I think, just pushed me even deeper into wanting to excel, because now everything came about like I have to be the best. I have to prove myself. I have to make sure that nobody can ever fault me. And I don't think there was a conscious thing like that narrative, but I remember at 12 I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to now become head girl at high school. And so then ended up deciding I didn't want to go to another school where there was a majority of white people. I wanted to go to a school where there was a majority of people of color. So I went to a different school. So it was a total opposite. Now it was an English school, and there were mostly colored people at the school. I made sure I was first in the grade. I was literally first in the grade every term almost. I think there were 2 or 3 terms in my entire high school career where I wasn't number one. And at the end of it, I wasn't head girl again. I wasn't deputy either. And I think that was very painful for me. What it showed me, and I think the narrative then became like, oh, well, it doesn't matter how well I do. I mean, I passed matric with like 102.8%. And I just felt like it doesn't matter how well I do, it's just not good enough. I'm not good enough. Who I am is not good enough. So then the whole narrative became it doesn't matter whether I'm myself and it doesn't matter how hard I try, just what I do, anything that comes from Taryn just isn't good enough. So it was a very difficult lesson to learn at 12 and then again at 18 years old. And I didn't understand it until my, I would say, early 30s, to be honest. And I would say some of that stuff is still something I'm working through now, even.
And I mean, that comes with a whole lot of stories of shame and being abandoned and not being seen and heard. And I mean, there's a whole lot that comes in with that. So, carrying this along your journey, tell us a little bit about the catalyst, So, you've got this archetype of the good girl, people pleaser. Um, what was the catalyst to your spiritual awakening, or finding that consciousness that you clearly suppressed deeply and buried?
So after matric, I think I felt like I probably had a bit of burnout, but probably didn't even really know that I had it. So I was insistent then that there's no point in doing what society wants me to do, whether society is my mom and dad or my teachers and the so called adults who are supposed to have my best interests at heart. I then became pretty clear that I wanted to just then do what I wanted to do because then I realized, well, my life is for me on some level, right? So I always wanted to be an actress when I was a little girl. So when I finished school, I said to my parents, I'm going to go study acting, and I studied acting. But I think this is a thing that a lot of people don't understand. Just because you make one positive choice doesn't mean that all that conditioning and programming that come with years and years of doing things a particular way just falls away, right? So then essentially what showed up, again, the same kind of habits. I really wanted to do well. So I did really well at university. I graduated top in my class for acting. Granted, I think it's also a very natural quality for me to do well. I do like excellence. I do like excelling. So that is a personality trait that I've had to recently reclaim because it came with so much trauma. But during that time, I would say in my first year I was actually very depressed because I expected that I'd feel happy because now I'd chosen something that felt authentic to me and something I'd always wanted to do. But I actually didn't feel that way. And if I look back on it now, I think a lot of what was actually happening was that shedding of identity and recognizing that who I've been hasn't really been serving me, but I don't think I was completely aware of that. The real catalyst happened though when I graduated from university and I had these big dreams of going to Johannesburg and being a famous actress. And I went to Joburg and I was like, okay, we're going to make it. I wanted to be on the soaps. And I would go for auditions, and every time I went for an audition, they would tell me, "You're really good, but you just don't look like our pictures." And they'd show me the pictures, and the pictures would be of a darker person, right? Darker skin color, particular kind of hairstyle, and I was just like, "This is ridiculous," because I was told that I'm not colored enough to play a colored woman, and I then, in all of this, while this was happening, I started dating someone while I was in Johannesburg. My entire family was in Cape Town, except for my mom. She was in Joburg. And so, round about this time, dating a new person, and my brother has an accident. And he also studied acting, and he was on his way to the National Arts Festival. And the car had hit a the tire had burst, and so the car rolled. He had been sleeping at the time of the accident, so he was still really dizzy, and the car was upside down, and he had fallen on the exhaust pipe, so he got badly burned, and a real freak accident actually. And so that moment was a massive moment in my entire family. And we nearly lost my brother. And so we all then ended up in Grahamstown with him, having to make really massive decisions around what the future looked like. And both my parents were in a lot of pain, and they had responded in their different ways, right? And I became that person that was like, okay, let's sort this out. I organized us a place to stay, spoke to my parents about how we needed to move forward around the things with my brother because he wasn't getting to see a doctor. And so I went into like fix, calm mode. And then once all of that had been sorted out and my brother was getting better, my mom then left Johannesburg and came to Cape Town, and the entire family was then in Cape Town. But I went back to Joburg and I was alone in Johannesburg. Now in this relationship with someone who I'd probably known for a month before my brother's accident happened. And now being in a new city, um, being by myself, having like this very traumatic incident, yeah, it was really tough. I didn't feel like I could actually be with my family, oddly enough. I felt like I needed to be strong, and I had made a decision to pursue my career in Joburg. So I needed to continue doing that. And if I think about it now, I think there must have just been conditioning from always having to be go getter, succeed, do well, that programming on some level must have kicked in, like just survival. That's how I knew how to survive. Just keep going, just keep going, just keep going. But I was broken because it was devastating to have to deal with nearly losing a family member and now having someone completely transformed because my brother has really bad burns on his face, right? So it was never ever going to be the same. And the person I was seeing was not the nicest person. Let's just say the relationship wasn't healthy at all. And because I was in a very vulnerable state and very needy, I latched onto this person because they were the only person that I knew there. And I got involved in a very toxic dynamic and a very unhealthy relationship where the person that I was involved with, unbeknownst to me at the time, was using drugs. They were using meth. I had thought that he had some sort of like bipolar because the symptoms they look quite similar, the highs and the lows. And being someone who's always fixing, right, I was also drawn to this because I felt sorry for him and cared about him. And how can someone have this kind of mental illness? It's not fair. And I had heard about his story and his trauma, right? So he'd had a very traumatic childhood and grown up around domestic violence. And so everything that I was feeling, I had suppressed actually, and then put my focus on another person now. Now it wasn't my family. I was now away from my family. Now my focus was this person that I was in a relationship with. And wanting to help him, wanting to heal him, instead of recognizing that I was actually going through a really massive, like massive pain myself and not recognizing the full extent of that. And in the relationship, whenever I had sought comfort or needed him or, yeah, needed support, he was obviously high and didn't have capacity for me. And when he wasn't high, he was abusive. And it started very much with emotional abuse. And then eventually it escalated to physical abuse. And during that time, that was about 3.5 years on and off with this person. And I went into a depression. I hid a lot of my behavior from other people. And then those 3.5 years being with him, that on and off cycle, the abuse cycle, which is that beautiful honeymoon period, and then everything's amazing, and then the tension starts happening, and then there's the violence, and then there's the separation, and then there's the honeymoon, and then it just keeps going through that kind of cycle. And there was a point in that entire cycle with him where, oh, and I've never shared this before, but I think it is relevant, and I think I'm ready to to talk about it is I had actually uh, fallen pregnant, and I never thought that me falling pregnant would make me go, oh my word, I don't want to have this baby. But it did, because I realized I didn't want to have a child with someone like this and in this kind of situation. And so I remember I made the decision to have an abortion, and it was at 5 weeks. And after that happened, I recognized that I had made a decision on some sort of level to be with this person. Because if I could have gone through all of these kinds of things, why would I still be with this person? Because even after I had had the abortion, I didn't want to leave him. I went back to him. And yeah, that moment came in the shower one day. I was standing in the shower and I was at his place and I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. And I had looked at myself in the shower and I said, on some sort of level, you have to be choosing this, because you don't have to be here. You don't have to be here. There's so many things that have happened that are wrong, that are not in alignment with what you want for yourself. Why are you here? And I think that moment opened up a lot for me, because I remember from that moment I started being a lot more aware of what was going on with me. And that's when I started questioning victimhood. But it made me go, what does it mean to be a victim? How much of this am I choosing, and how much of it is someone else like inflicting on me, and can I blame them? And I didn't have the answers then, because it's a very complex question and it like lots of layers to all of it. But that question itself opened up a lot for me. At the same time that this happened, I started getting a lot of my psychic gifts started coming online again. I remember there was one night I was sleeping in the bed with him and I had seen something at the foot of the bed. And it wasn't a nice thing. I can tell you that. It had horns and it had red eyes, and the energy of it just felt dark. And I didn't know what it was. And I remember I went back to bed and I just closed my eyes and I was like, what is this? And then I had other incidents like that where I was by myself. And I remember there was one time that I felt like someone had come into my house and opened the door, and the window was open, and there was the curtains were blowing. And I remember I smelled this like strong smell of sulfur. Yeah, those were crazy incidents. And that's when I, at the same time, I was going back in acting, and I had met someone who was actually reading a lot of Sonia Choquette's work, so how to work with your guides, and was very interested in that. And he had started talking to me about guides. And this was someone I worked with who was a fellow actor. And he introduced me to one of my mentors. I was about 21, 22, 23 at this time, 23 about, yeah. And I had gone for a reading with this person. And I told him about the types of things that I was seeing and what I was experiencing. So he started helping me make sense of what was going on. At the same time, I also started reading tarot and was very drawn to tarot. Um, and yeah, with the person that I was in the relationship with, I started getting messages about him. So at some point, I'd broken up with him. I started doing yoga, and naturally, when I did the yoga, I hadn't known much about chakras, but it was again just very natural for me. When I started doing yoga, I would visualize my chakras and doing energy healing on it while I was doing the doing yoga. And I recognize now that I was probably just doing healing on myself and I didn't even know that I was doing it. So that, um, the yoga plus doing that, that started shifting things for me. And then I started getting insights about this person. So I'd gone through a whole long journey with him, tried to help him heal his stuff. He eventually, at some point, had come clean and said that he was an addict and had spoken about his problems. And then we eventually took him to his father and he went to rehab. And then I really started getting interested in manifestation. And I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, which completely changed my life. I would say that was one of those. That was one of the books that was like just, yeah, it shifted the way I thought about it. You know, and then I started playing a little bit with imagination and manifesting and working with my intuitive ability. And when I read that book, I started also reading about how to manifest new love, because I'd been in this horrible situation, right, with all of these dark things happening.
I'm curious to know how, the spiritual started affecting shifting your life. We've got the intuition coming back, and we've got, so how did that kind of, how are you feeling inside? What, I mean, there was a lot of healing that needed. I mean, you'd been in this really, and thank you for your vulnerability of sharing that and what happened, because there must have been a very challenging and difficult time in a different city, away from your family, which you're extremely close to. So when did the inside start feeling better? You know what I mean? Because that's holding a lot. The inner world is difficult.
Completely. It started feeling better. Before it started feeling better, it really got to the worst point, right? Like, so the abortion, and then like that like was almost like the lowest point of
The dark
everything.
night. The
Yes,
like when we just
yes.
get, I'm gonna die if I go forward, I'm gonna die if I go backwards. That deep feeling of, like, I just don't know where to go.
Yes, and I was completely depressed that time. And I don't think anybody knew that I was depressed. And I also really hid it, you know? And I was stuck in this relationship and I just felt really chained to pain. That's what I felt like. I remember I felt like, oh my goodness, I am chained. And I just kept doing the same things, hoping that it would get better, but it didn't get better. Then I started maybe exercising more, hoping that that would shift things, and it sort of did. It shifted my energy a little bit, right? And the yoga also shifted my energy. And I started journaling as well. And I would write about how I felt. That was very useful for me. I wrote about how I felt. And I would see that I would write the same things over and over. And I recognized no one was going to save me from this. As much as I had like these pockets of support that helped things started getting better when I said to myself, I'm going to have to save myself here. And when I made that decision, I then decided, okay, I'm gonna get a better job at as an actress, something that I feel is more resonant with me, instead of like hoping for auditions, and getting something here and there. I need something more stable. I decided I needed a better routine. I decided I needed these things to pull myself out of my depression. Um, I decided I needed to go and speak to a psychologist. I needed to process these things, and I needed to be more honest about what was happening. Because for me, what was a big thing was being this achiever and this good girl, and doing everything right from grade 2 up until university. Now I'm in a relationship with a drug addict. I'm smoking pot like 4 or 5 times a week. I'm having an abortion. I'm in this relationship. I'm like avoiding myself. So I was doing the complete opposite. It was like the shadow was there, right? And it's not really a surprise, because if you're putting this show to the world, right, and performing all of, which didn't feel like that to me at the time, but so much light there, then all of a sudden, all of this other darkness that's never been confronted comes to the surface. So when I made the decision that, okay, I need to change this, then I just changed little things, little things, little things, right? And those things started building on one another. And then when I read the book, The Power of Now, I think there was one line when he said something about When you get upset with your partner in the moment and you're feeling a particular way about something, and you're not necessarily experiencing what is happening in that moment, you're experiencing all this accumulated pain from years and years and years that you haven't witnessed, acknowledged, or even known about. Because I think a lot of people, and I think this is what's uh, intense about a spiritual awakening, is you go like, but why am I all of a sudden so, why are these feelings so intense? Why is it so overwhelming? Why is there so much? I've been doing so many things right, or at least that was what was going on for me. But that understanding that came through from that book really like lit a light bulb for me. And that was when I went like, yeah, this is years of stuff, years of never talking about my feelings and always rather focusing on schoolwork. I was very overweight as a teenager because I was constantly eating my feelings. When I read that, that shifted a lot for me. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to choose the positive. Let's focus on choosing the positive. And that's when I then did the work, exercised, got that new job. And I then focused on looking at what are the positive things. And at the same time, I was going to, what do they call it? For the people who are dating someone who is in Al-Anon. So
Al-Anon.
I wasn't at Al-Anon, but I was like the family of the Al-Anon, right? Because I was still seeing this person. And I remember sitting in these groups and these people would talk about their relationships and how they're in relationships with addicts. That helped a lot because then I felt like I'm not alone. Me helping this person and the way that I feel about wanting to help this person, there are other people like me. But I remember there was one lady that sat there and she had said, whenever her husband goes into using, she they have two separate bedrooms, and then she'll just go to the other bedroom and then he'll just be in another bedroom using. And I just thought, but that doesn't make sense to me, because if she just goes to another bedroom, all she's saying is, you can continue, I'll just be in the other bedroom. The way she had phrased it though was that she has a boundary around it because now he doesn't have access to her in being in the same room. And I thought to myself, well, from my experience with an addict, they don't care. They just want to be with their drug, because that's how my ex had been. So that clicked for me. Didn't say anything to her, but that's what I guess I needed to hear. And in that moment, I felt like I don't want to be this person. I don't want to tell this story of how I'm saving people all the time. And my life now becomes about rescuing someone else. And there's that question again of victimhood, right? And you're obviously very familiar with the drama triangle with the rescuer, the persecutor, and the victim. Another night I'd left the meeting again and there was a woman, and you can't really talk about other people's business in those circles. You just listen, you're just supposed to be supportive, and everybody has their process. But this woman came to me in the parking lot and she pulled me behind a tree and she said to me, don't do it. Don't do it. She was probably 62, beautiful Italian woman, like long, gorgeous, flowing hair. And she had been with her husband since she was 35. So for the last 33 years, she'd been with this person, right? And she said to me, you're so young and you're so pretty. You don't need to choose this life for yourself. And those two instances really stood with me. And I started questioning whether I wanted to stay in this relationship because I felt like I was giving up my life force for someone else. As much as I'd been a little bit more focused on myself, I was still trying to save someone else instead of really looking at myself. I then eventually ended the relationship with him. I then met someone else and I did a lot of manifestation work around calling this person in. That relationship didn't work out. Just before COVID hit, I had I had now shifted work. I'd gone overseas and come back, and now I was working at a marketing company. And I kept getting this desire that I needed to follow my own soul purpose. I kept getting this feeling like I was like, I have a bigger purpose. There's something else here. So I ended up working for a woman who was quite narcissistic and reminded me of that abusive relationship that I was in. And that's when I decided I'm done. I'm done following other people's rules of how I'm supposed to be. This is my life. I quit and I stopped looking for relationships because I had this pattern of always wanting to have a partner, always being in a relationship. And at the time that I quit that job, I also got this realization that I'd been seeking love externally rather than looking inside. So let's just focus on ourselves. And once I did that, when I just focused internally and focused on my internal journey, I had the stream of consciousness start coming through me. Yeah, that was very powerful. And I wrote a book in 3 months. And the book was all about patterns and your intuition and following your path and how to do that. And this wasn't something that I'd heard before, it was something that just came through me. And I remember I was able to do it in 3 months because I would just sit in front of my laptop and I'd just be like, I'm here. And I could feel the stream of consciousness just come through. And that was very powerful for me. And I think that is actually really what healed me on a much deeper level, because what started happening was I would write these things and then I'd get insights while writing this. And I wrote a lot about this abusive relationship that I'd been in. And because I was writing about it, I got to also reflect on it and get to see where I'd missed myself, where my wounds were coming from. Then I started realizing, oh, wow, I had a lot of abandonment wounds. And then these incidents that happened when I was a child started making more sense. I wanted to publish the book and I wanted to be super famous and who knows whatever else. So I had two publishers look at the book. I've still got the book and I still have plans for it, hopefully sometime in the future. And they both said that the book was really good, but the feedback that I'd gotten was that there were two voices in the book. And I know what the two voices were. The one voice was mine, so Taryn, and the other one was clearly spirit, or spirit channeling through me. And the one publisher said to me, yeah, there's times when you're talking about these teachings and it just doesn't sound like your voice. And so her guidance, oh, this is so interesting how spirit works, because I'm sitting here going like, why am I talking about this? But her guidance was that I needed to merge the two voices and that I needed to tell it from my perspective, not have these two voices in the book. I don't know. I don't know sitting here if that is actually the right guidance for me and this work. Maybe this will become something in the future. Who knows? But I never did anything with it and I left that. And that, when I did that, then I started getting a lot of messages from my guides. I started getting a lot of intuitive messages. And then I started being drawn to lots of spiritual things. Now it was like I'd been opened up because I surrendered and I said, I'm going to focus on myself. And I think when you do that, your truth starts pulling you in certain directions, right? So the first thing that happened was I started doing energy work with this group in with this woman actually in the US, and it was around the time that whole George Floyd incident happened. So it was at that time that I really felt I'm really going through a spiritual awakening. So I started talking about my experiences because there were so many things that were happening. You know, the ringing in the ears, getting insights about things, could feel that I was getting all of these downloads, having these insights about myself, insights about other people, and it was very overwhelming, but it can also be quite like intoxicating in its own kind of way, right? And she was offering this course called Embodied Liberation, which was literally related kind of to the George Floyd incidents and about people of color reclaiming their bodies and what ownership of their bodies feels like. And that was quite profound for me. But I found when I was in that community, I couldn't even speak. Like it was so difficult for me to just say, hello, my name is Taryn, I'm from South Africa. And I remember just being in that community and just introducing my name the first time. I was like, I felt like a fraud. because I was like, ooh, who do I think that I am that I can be in this space? Then I started getting these visions. Oh my word. And I started hearing about things happening in March, the time that COVID happened. And one night I went to bed and I saw something stand in the corner of my room. And it was someone wearing a mask, like their face was covered, but they also had like a long tube coming out of their mouths. And they were standing in the corner of my room. And I remember going, what is this? And I thought this was maybe an entity or something that needed to be cleared. So I phoned my cousin, who's also an energy healer, but she's based in the UK. And she said to me, it sounds like something you need to clear. And I said to her, I don't think I can clear this. It feels inevitable. And I remember that's what it felt like to me. So that happened. And then I remember I did ayahuasca as well. And when I was on ayahuasca, I got this message that there's going to be a sickness in the people. And I remember the retreat that I was on when I did the medicine. I still ran away one of the days because that was when I got the message around there's a sickness in the people, there's a sickness in the people. It was a longer retreat. I think we were there for like 3 days. And then I realized, no, this isn't a bad thing. This is actually a good thing. And I'm going to be needed during this time. So I walked back onto the farm. These people had no idea that I'd left. Both those incidents were in December 2019. And then I remember in 2020, I was putting out a lot of content on YouTube and that kind of thing. And I remember saying, in March, something big is going to happen. And everybody's going to think it's a bad thing, but it's actually going to be really good. I had no idea what I was talking about, but I remember I was just like saying things that were coming through me. And I wish I had that video, but I ended up deleting it. And in that time, I kept getting pulled to the School of Intuition and Healing. So I did the energy management course, which was profound for me because the school was hosting something during that time. We were helping people like ground themselves and like manage the pandemic. And I remember a lot of root chakra issues, safety issues were coming up for everyone at that time, but it was insane, right? And I found that course, and it was a 2 day. We did it over a weekend, and it was so profound. So I feel I was eventually guided to the school, you know. And once I did energy healing, that was when I was like, okay, this is this. I think I can do this. This feels like home. This feels like what I've been looking for my whole life. I I can't get bored of this work. This it's there's a mentor that I have who says you must find work that demands all of you. And that's like your bad and your good and your full commitment. Because work like that is actually going to nourish you, right? And help you grow and really evolve. You know, and I think I'm very fortunate to have found what that is for me.
Taryn, what an extraordinary life that you've had. And it's been, we've heard various different, you know, deep wounding and deep trauma that you have been through, and life on life's terms at many, many different levels, from, physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. If somebody is going through any one of these things or multiple things, what is the starting block to start healing, to start shifting the energy of where somebody is at, no matter whether they're close to the dark night, whether they're in the dark night, whether they're on the way up? Is there one technique? I'm sure there are many, but one golden thing, gold dust, that you could give us today?
I mean, there's so many. So the first is people have an incredible amount of judgment towards themselves when things seem off balance, or when they're doing something that's considered wrong, or they're having a difficult experience, or when they're experiencing negative emotions, or there's some sort of negativity in their lives. And that relationship with negativity and the judgment that people have around that is, I think, the biggest blocker of people actually doing something about it. So, the first thing I would say is recognizing that that is so normal to have a negative experience, to go through some sort of wounding, to feel shadow parts of yourself, to not know what to do, to feel lost, to feel like you're going through a transition. And I think that's the first thing, is to go, this is actually normal. That recognition is very empowering. And then the second thing is just compassion. I know that the thing that got me through and still gets me through every stage was actually just going, oh, I'm just really going to love myself. Even if I didn't know how to, I was just like, I would say to myself, I'm just going to love myself through this. We're just going to love ourselves through this. We're just going to love ourselves through this. We're just going to get up one more time. We'll just get up one more time. And then there's the third thing, don't be afraid to ask for support. It's so simple just to go, hey, I actually don't know what's going on with me, and I actually need help. Because there are people who've been through what you're going through who can help you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And if anyone's listening today, reach out to the school if you need some help or some support. You can book a chat with myself. You can email us, and we'll have a chat. So if any of Taryn's conversation has brought up something for you, please don't hesitate to book a chat with myself, and to email the school. We can point you in the right direction. So don't be afraid to do that. Taryn, a big thank you for your love, your vulnerability, your showing up. It's always so wonderful to be a witness and in conversation to you and the extraordinary personal growth that you've gone through. It's amazing. From my side to those listening, if you enjoyed this, please give us a thumbs up. Please share it with someone who might like to listen to it. Um, we look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. And a big thank you to all of you for showing up. And everyone, take care. Bye.